Islam simply means submission. One who submits is a Muslim. Of course, the one to whom one submits is Allah and Allah alone, and he may not be associated in any way with any of his creatures. To do so would constitute shirk, usually translated as idolatry. Muslims dislike the term Mohammedism because they believe that it implies that they worship Muhammad, which they certainly do not. Muhammad was born in 570 AD in the town of Mecca, just a few miles inland from the town of Jeddah on the coast of the Red Sea. The Quraysh tribe dominated Mecca. It consisted of several clans. Muhammad's affiliation was with the Hashim clan, or the Banu Hashim. For the early history of Islam, it becomes important that the Umayyad clan was the politically dominant one, and that they were the most active opponents of Muhammad in the early years. But this part is beyond the scope of this presentation. Muhammad's father died before Muhammad was even born. His mother passed away around the time that he was 7 years old. His uncle Abu Talib took care of him. Muhammad and his uncle got along quite well, and Muhammad was allowed to accompany his uncle on various business trips. There he encountered Jews and Christians who believed in only one God. Abu Talib rose to the position of leader of the Hashim clan, and thus was also known at times as Abu Banu, the father of the clan. He had a certain amount of influence that protected Muhammad later on. Muslims refer to the time in Arabia prior to Muhammad as Al-Jahiliyyah, the time of darkness. Mecca was a thriving center for religious pilgrimages, facilitating polytheism, the belief in many gods, idolatry, and animism, the veneration of spirits. The most important shrine in Mecca was the Kaaba, a cube-shaped building that allegedly housed 360 idols. The most important deity was the god Hubal, who administered divination or fortune-telling. There were also 3 goddesses, Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, who were known as the daughters of Allah, the idea being that God, or a god, had propagated these 3 divine women by means of sexual relations, a notion that Muhammad found repugnant and that could go a long way to explain his rejection of the idea of Jesus as the Son of God. Though Christians do not believe that Jesus being the Son of God was the result of God having sexual relations with Mary or any such idea either. There is a certain amount of ambivalence in the term Allah as it was used during this time. In a fundamental sense, Allah is simply the generic term for God. But he also had a personal identity, though it was usually remote, a heritage of an original monotheism that was slowly passing into oblivion in the Arabian culture. There was no statue of Allah in Mecca, and the majority of Meccans believed that Hubal was greater than Allah. However, there was a small group of people called the Hanif, or righteous ones, who worshipped Allah alone. Thus, we have now 3 sources which helped Muhammad come to his realization that there was only one God: Judaism, Christianity, and the Hanif. As a young man, Muhammad went to work for a wealthy widow named Khadija. He showed himself to be a shrewd businessman, and the two fell in love. When Muhammad was 25, he married the 40-year-old Khadija. They appear to have had a loving and supportive marriage. When Muhammad was around 40 years old, he was going through a time of deep reflection on God and religion. In 610 AD, he was meditating in a cave where, so the account goes, the angel Gabriel appeared to him, and the message that he received was his first revelation, now included in the Qur'an as Sura 96. According to many accounts, Gabriel showed Muhammad a page out of a heavenly book and commanded him to read and to recite this passage. There was a problem, however. Muhammad was apparently illiterate, so how could he possibly do so? The angel reminded him of the greatness and power of Allah, who created human beings out of a little clot of blood. Again, one may feel confused here. Didn't God create Adam out of the dust of the earth? Yes, he did, and the Qur'an affirms it just as much as the Bible. The message here was not about the creation of humanity, but of each individual human being. We all started our existence out of the small, microscopic ovum, which does appear as nothing more than a tiny clot of blood. If Allah can perform that miracle, then surely He can also enable Muhammad to undertake this ministry. After this experience, Muhammad was confused, but Khadija not only believed him, but told him that this vision had come from God and that he should embrace his work as a prophet. After 3 years, the revelations set in again, and Muhammad started to proclaim what he was told throughout Mecca. He carried basically a threefold message: that there was only one God, that people needed to submit to Allah and follow the path of righteousness that He had disclosed, and that there would be a last judgment at which all people would be judged on the basis of their works. Needless to say, Muhammad's teachings, if accepted, would cut into the business of idolatry and superstition from which many Meccans made a good living. Thus there was active hostility and eventually physical harassment. Khadija's wealth and Abu Talib's standing protected Muhammad for a while, but when they both died, the harassment turned into active persecution. By then, Muhammad had acquired a number of followers, and most of them left Mecca for other places where they would not be oppressed. Finally, in 622 AD, Muhammad himself, along with a few others who had lingered, left the city and fled to Medina, an event called the Hijra. The Muslim calendar dates from that point on and continues to be reckoned as AH, Anno Hijra, the year of or after the Hijra. It is at this point that Islam came together as a community. The Ummah or community makes sure that the people in it are faithful to Islam. In its full form, it is always a political as well as a religious entity. Muhammad was both the religious and political leader of the fledgling Islamic community in Medina. he was also the commander of a new army of Muslims. They frequently attacked caravans to or from Mecca, thereby weakening the city and also providing themselves with a source of funding. There were numerous skirmishes between the Muslims and the Meccans and 3 important battles. Let me just summarize the end results. Militarily, the outcomes were mixed, but the bottom line was that a confederation among the Quraysh of Mecca and other tribes, both Arabian and Jewish, dissolved, and by 630 AD had become so weakened that Muhammad and his forces were able to take over Mecca and turn it into an Islamic city. Muhammad died in 632 AD. The events of the decades following Muhammad's death are significant for the future of Islam, but outside of the scope of this slide show. Instead, we need to look at what it is that Muslims believe and practice. There are 6 fundamental beliefs of Islam. Sometimes they are numbered as 5. That just means that 2 of them have been conflated into 1. We begin with God. There is only one God, Allah. Everything else is premised on that declaration. There are spirits, good ones such as angels, and evil ones such as demons. The Qur'an tells the story that after God had created Adam, he commanded all of the spirits to bow down before Adam, this new and wonderful creature. All of the spirits complied with the exception of one, called Iblis. He is also known as Shaitan, the devil, and he has caused trouble ever since. Prophets. God has sent many men to various places at various times to teach the same message as Muhammad. Unfortunately, in each case, they were either totally rejected or their teaching became corrupted. Prophets include figures from the Bible, such as Adam, Noah, Abraham, David, and Jesus, as well as others, such as Al-Hud. Muhammad is called the seal of the prophets. That is to say, he is the final prophet, since his message has not been corrupted and is preserved for us in the Qur'an. There can be no more prophets after him. Prophets such as Muhammad are also called messengers or apostles because they have left us books. Other examples are Moses with the law, David with the Psalms, and Jesus with the Gospel. According to Islam, these books have also been altered, and only the Qur'an is the true word from God. We already mentioned the Last Judgment. All human beings will receive a book that contains all of the deeds of their lifetimes. If it is placed into their right hand, they will immediately know that they are considered righteous and are on their way to heaven. If their book is put into their left hand, they were unrighteous and must from then on endure hell. Finally, there is the belief that we can call decrees, sovereignty, or, going with the Arabic, al-qadr, power. I shall summarize it with a simple statement that everything that happens in the world is under the control of God. The 5 so-called pillars of Islam are not the only duties required of a person, but they are the 5 central acts of worship: confession, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, and the pilgrimage. let's take each one in turn and begin confession. This means that a person declares the basic creed of Islam. I confess that there is no God or no Allah but God, Allah, and that Muhammad is the prophet of God. Anyone who declares this statement with meaning and sincerity has become a Muslim. However, I need to add that this does not mean that the person is therefore guaranteed to be in heaven. You also have to become righteous in your actions. Just being a Muslim does not necessarily earn you anything if you then do not follow the commandments that have been conveyed from God by means of Muhammad. So the confession must be sincere. In the Qur'an we read, the hypocrites, they think they are overreaching Allah, but He will overreach them. When they stand up to prayer, they stand without earnestness to be seen of men, but little do they hold Allah in remembrance. The hypocrites will be in the lowest depths of the fire. No helper will you find for them. The second pillar is prayer. Prayers are to be said 5 times a day. At sunrise, early in the afternoon, later afternoon, at sunset, and 1 hour after sunset. If possible, one should say one's prayers in a mosque, but that is becoming increasingly difficult in our complex societies. The alternative is to sanctify a space around you by means of, say, a prayer rug. Women may also say their prayers in the mosque or at home. In the mosque, they pray in a segregated area. Aside from whatever issues there may or may not be concerning women in Islam, once you consider the position of prostration that is a part of Islamic prayer, you will realize that simple decency would stand in the way of men and women praying mixed together. Prayer times are announced by a person called the muezzin from the top of the minaret, the turret usually attached to a mosque. Nowadays it is frequently broadcast by way of a public address system. What follows are the words that the muezzin chants or sings, as it were. A person who can recite this call or other passages from the Qur'an in a drawn-out musical fashion is highly esteemed. The call to prayer begins with the slogan, Allahu Akbar. It's repeated 4 times. Allahu Akbar means God is the greatest, and it implies He is uniquely greater than anything else. Then follows the confession. Ashadu, I confess. Allah, there is no. Ilahe, Allah, means Allah. Ila Allah, I confess that there is no Allah but Allah. And then Ashadu anna Muhammad Rasulu Allah, I confess that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Hey Allah as salat, come to prayer. Hey Allahi falah, come to devotion. Then Allahu Akbar 2 more times, and once again the confession, La ilaha Allah illa Allah wa Muhammad Rasul Allah. As one comes to a mosque for prayer, one must first undertake ablution in order to be ritually clean, a state called IHRAM. It consists of washing one's eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands and feet 3 times with water. There is nothing in Islam to prohibit a person from praying directly to Allah, but these 5 official prayers are scripted along with the physical postures one takes up during the prayers. They consist essentially of recitation from various sections of the Qur'an. One cycle of prayer is called 1 Rakat. The prostration displayed in this picture is often highlighted, but here is a full Rakat with all of the various postures. They only take a few minutes, but at different times of day, different numbers of Rakat are required, ranging from 2 to 5. One begins informally with standing and cupping one's ears, indicating one's readiness to listen to God. The formal part starts when the prayer leader or imam calls out Allah, and everyone begins to recite the first surah of the Qur'an, Al-Fatiha, the opening. All of the stages that follow are always signaled by the imam by calling out Allah or Allahu Akbar. Other than that, the prayers are said silently or under one's breath. The next step is bowing before Allah. One goes from there directly to the first of 2 prostrations. Next comes kneeling. During this short phase, one may also add one's personal petitions. There follows another time of prostration. During all of these stages, the person quietly recites the appropriate sections from the Qur'an as they are prescribed. Finally, one can stand again. 1 Rakat is over, but another one may follow depending on the time of day. Please let me emphasize again that simply going through the prayer ritual is insufficient in true Islam if one's heart and mind are not committed to following Allah and the teachings of Muhammad. Pillar 3 is fasting during the months of Ramadan. Ramadan is the name of the month during which Muhammad received his first revelations. Since Islam has a lunar calendar, it is several days shorter than our solar one. Thus, Ramadan migrates around a year, and given a number of years, it will eventually show up during each of our seasons. Neither food nor drink may be taken in between sunrise and sunset. Of course, the point of Ramadan is not just to stay away from food during those times, but to spend extra time in prayer and meditation, as is being done in the mosque in this particular picture. Muslims observing Ramadan should eat moderately early in the morning before sunrise and after sunrise at night. However, the evening meals are often communal get-togethers with much food provided for everyone, as displayed here by the caretaker of this mosque stirring this rather huge pot of Malaysian soup. Ramadan officially concludes when the first sign of the new moon of the next month is seen. Then begins the joyous feast of Eid al-Fitr. The fourth pillar is almsgiving. Generosity of Muslims to the poor is a command of the Qur'an. It is implemented with a formal levy called the Zakat. There are a lot of rules concerning how much a Muslim must give, but it amounts to roughly 1/40 or 2.5% of one's annual gain. The fifth pillar is the pilgrimage to Mecca. Each Muslim should, if at all possible, go to Mecca once in his or her life at the appropriate time and go through a number of rites. This picture captures the huge number of people walking around the Kaaba 7 times. This is just one of a number of actions that must be done, spanning several days. Can you imagine being a Muslim who has known about the Kaaba all of his life? He has prayed in the direction of the Kaaba 5 times a day, and now, perhaps after 50 years of doing so, he is finally there in person and sees it for real right before his eyes. The experience is said to be overwhelming. Having done the Hajj, or pilgrimage, though required of everyone in theory, frequently gives a person special standing in their community. For example, in Southeast Asia, you can replace the traditional black songkok with a white one. As we said earlier, the 5 pillars are the 5 central acts of worship, but there are many other requirements that a good Muslim should observe. Those that are required, for example modesty in dress, are classified as fard. Haram is the category of those things or actions that are forbidden. That would of course include anything that is shirk or idolatry and other specified prohibitions such as drinking intoxicants. Then there are actions that are permitted, or things that a Muslim may partake of. For example, food must be approved as halal or permitted in a code that is very similar to the Jewish kosher code. Thank you for watching this video, which I hope was informative. For more information, please visit my websites, and better yet, read my book, Neighboring Faiths, the 2nd edition. There are 2 chapters, numbers 3 and 4, that deal specifically with Islam. Thank you again, and may you go in peace.